What is happening, you guys? Welcome back to the Let's Go Win podcast, where we are here to help you be happy, healthy, wealthy, and get better every single day. Gentleman, I'm about to bring on, he is very knowledgeable. He brings up some incredible points in the interview. I'm so excited for you guys to hear it. Get ready to write a bunch down because Dave Durand is a best-selling author, leadership strategist, and serial entrepreneur known for building high-performance teams and successful companies. As the author of Leading Giants, he equips professionals to sell more, lead better, and earn their next big promotion. Dave's no-fluff approach to influence, culture building, and decision-making has made him a trusted voice for CEOs, sales teams, and rising leaders alike. Well, Dave, so good to have you on the show. And off air, I said, we got to talk about the 6 kids. And then he said, actually 9. Brother, you've done a lot of things, and that's juggling a lot of things while doing that. That's amazing. Welcome to the show, and I can't wait to dive into that with you.
It's great to be with you, no doubt about it. And I know that we have that value of making sure that work doesn't get in the way of family life, but the two of them actually build each other up. And I think it's an important place to go.
Yeah, I don't hear often people having, while building their company, they had 6 kids. And how do you literally do both? Not only do both, but do both very successfully. How do you manage that, brother? That's something that is unique. I don't hear that often. In fact, I usually hear the other side of the coin, which is, yep, company's awesome, divorced a couple times, don't really have a relationship with my kids, my health's kind of a mess. You clearly have a little bit of a path that allowed you to do everything successfully.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was married for 20 years with the 6 kids, and I did go through a divorce. None of that had anything to do with my work. And I'm a believing Catholic, and so I don't even believe in divorce. But you have 50% of control over that, and when that sort of thing happens, it happens. And I don't really get into the story too personally, but it did leave me as a single father. And I had a very close relationship with my children. I wanted to make sure that I maintained that. So I was building a company that ended up, billions in sales, and I ended up selling it for 9 figures twice, actually. And so thousands of employees across every single state and province in North America. We were in Europe for a little while as well too. But in building that, though, I would have people come to me and say, well, Dave, I don't know if you understand, but I'm a single mother, or, mostly as women who would say that. I'm a single mother, so I'm trying to balance all these things. What they didn't know is that I was going home that night to make a spaghetti dinner by myself for 30 kids on the soccer team for my daughter, while I'm picking up my other kid from school and planning a birthday party for later that day as well too. So I balanced all of them. And one thing that I knew is that when I die and I face God, he is absolutely without question going to hold me more accountable to what I did with my family than I did anything else. So I want to make sure that I was right with that. And then, by the way, because I had the mental clarity and I had a free soul, it made me able to focus very intensely on the work that I did.
Yeah, that clarity, is that because of your faith, you feel, Dave? Or is it like literally, I don't have enough time to have jumbled thoughts? Like, I got to be clear on what the heck I'm doing, whether it's in business, with the kids. Where does that come from? Because again, I think a lot of times people don't have that clarity. They don't maybe have the vision that you had to create a company that you sold twice for 9 figures, which there's got to be a cool story there too.
Yeah.
But, where does that clarity come from, brother? How were you able to ascertain?
It is primarily for my faith. But if you notice, what I said was I'm a believing Catholic. A lot of people use the term devoted or faithful. I would classically be defined as those, but I go to confession probably every single week. And that is a sign of the fact that I'm an imperfect yet devoted Catholic. And I always want to point that very clear thing out, that I never want to misrepresent that I think that I'm holier than thou. I'm working it out like everybody else. But that whole idea of having faith at the central focus in the workplace, I think, is a good one. And one of the reasons that it is because it means that people talk about authenticity, they talk about integrity, which means you're going to be the same, inside the boardroom as you are outside. And when you know that God sees all that you do and that you're accountable to it, whether anybody sees it or not, then you have a much greater inclination to do what is right for the people in your organization and whatnot. And that, by the way, also reduces our ability or it actually increases our ability to have focus and clarity. So I do a lot of work here now that I've sold the company. I'm still the chairman of the board, and I have a regular responsibility, and I'm building other businesses as well too. But my primary focus now is to help people optimize their personality, which includes optimizing their influence, getting rid of their vice and their virtue. So many people say, well, I would be a better salesperson if I was just a little bit more outgoing. I could be more like Jam Ryerson if I could give a good speech, but I'm a little afraid to do that sort of thing. I would probably be better at a podcast if I could listen like the Let's Go Win team, right? So they want to learn these types of things, and they know there's a deficit, but they don't know how to get there. And it's not just as simple as a positive attitude. There's a certain complexity to that in reading everybody from Aristotle to Martin Seligman to Viktor Frankl to current people like Daniel Kahneman, all these different types of people. What are the scientific studies, the theological studies? What are the ancient philosophical studies? What connects? What matches? And if we look at all of those things and what's been consistent through millennium, and that is then backed up by modern day science, we've got something we can win with. And we've got something we can actually make quite simple, because otherwise it sounds pretty esoteric and complicated.
I'm trying to break all that down, which that was a lot. I like it. Gosh. So for you, your faith is clearly what you've landed on. This is how I'm going to show up to God first and foremost. So I'm not going to act one way and then act another. That doesn't make sense. And I love what you said. Look, I'm flawed. Like to think anybody's not flawed is that's crazy. By the way, at the time of this filming, the Pope just passed away yesterday. So as a believing Catholic, my condolences go out to you on that as well. I guess what I'd be curious on your story into really getting into business and growing this massive conglomerate, I guess. I mean, shoot, you said you're all over the country, international, in Europe at some point. Sold it a couple times. When did you know, like, man, I'm business. This is my thing. I'm great at this. I know my purpose and passion in life.
I learned it pretty young, but I didn't really understand it. So that's kind of the interesting thing about it, right? Our metacognition is to think about how we think, like our meta emotions is to feel about how we feel. Well, I knew there was business, and I could see business, and I knew I liked it, but I didn't know how to think about how I thought about that. You know what I mean? And so this is what I would say. When I was young, my father's an engineer. My mother was a stay-at-home mom, but she also was a teacher and did some daycare in order to just kind of help us with a little bit of our college education. And then my brothers went into engineering and followed my dad's tracks. I was the only one, kind of the black sheep, who had this like business mentality. And there was something about it that I knew, and I knew it was because I didn't have the aptitude as an engineer at all. And yet at the same time, I kind of felt like I understood people. I had an insight into human nature that I could tell when I was around others. And I was like, oh, you didn't see that happened there? Wait, no, they perceived that. You need to do that when they perceive it that way. And, oh, if you would have just said that, they would have wanted this. And you didn't have a friend because you did that. And I saw those things, and I didn't realize that they fit into business until I was then a college student. I sold Cutco knives for a summer. And that's where I started to realize, oh, there's a lot here by way of like skill, by the way of kind of inclination and like. But what I really started to discover there was how personality affected this, but I couldn't have worded it that way. It wasn't until I was a more mature man and I studied these things for 35 years. But I started to recognize that while I was generally motivated, I hated the phone and I was afraid to get on it. And I didn't want to do that. And while I was generally open to certain advice, there were certain things that I closed down, but I didn't realize it was because of my vanity or it was because of my pride that got in the way. I realized that there was certain extroversion and introversion. I don't know if you study these things at all, but there's something called the Big Five in personality, defined by Ocean: openness to experience. Then there's extroversion or conscientiousness first, then extroversion, then agreeability, neuroticism. And to study these things because they're the most scientifically based ways of looking at personality, much more than Myers-Briggs, which really isn't incredibly scientific, although it's anecdotal and there's some good things in it. It's more of a binary thing. This has like fluidity. So you're kind of open, kind of not. You can see where you are in it. You're not just either open or not. You're somewhere on a spectrum, right? And so I was intuitively understanding that I had some of these flaws, but not knowing how to overcome them. And then I just devoured every sort of. I remember I saw Tony Robbins in 1992, and I became certified in neuro-linguistic programming, certified in hypnotherapy, a very dubious certification, by the way. And I mean, I had those certifications in the early 90s, and I kind of grabbed onto a lot of them early on. And then I started to realize the more that I started building business and being able to take and move people to activity and see that if we made this type of change in culture, because the job of a leader is to build virtue in their teams. Most people never think of it that way. They don't talk about it that way. But if you want a great culture, you're going to have high virtue team, a low vice team. And I started to recognize patterns on how to actually influence those things. And I moved way away from the technique-oriented NLP sort of thing or hypnotherapy thing. And I started to really focus on changing people with virtue and eliminating vice. And that was like absolutely a tectonic shift.
All right. Well, everybody listening, they're looking to build great teams. It's definitely not the easiest thing for a lot of folks to do, but I like the idea here. We're going for high virtue, low vice. Now, is that at the interview table, Dave, that you're doing this, or you're literally saying, "Look, I'm bringing people in. I can grow them. I can develop them through these things." What does that look like, brother? Are you finding it at the interview table, like I'm doing behavioral interviewing to find, do they have a lot of vices? Do they believe in certain virtues? What did that look like for you?
That is a fantastic question. I've not been asked that, but I insert it because I'm not asked that because it's so important in it. So you can't. So a lot of people would say, okay, if somebody's going to be the ideal leader, they're going to be ENTJ or whatever it might be in Myers-Briggs. They like to look at personality types and profiles or a DISC profile or whatever it might be. Those things can be useful, but they don't really measure vice and virtue. They're a natural temperament. If you're taking them the right way, they're a natural temperament. All of us are born with natural vice and natural virtue. So using the 4 temperaments, which, by the way, Myers-Briggs and everything else has been built upon, and these go back thousands of years. Choleric. A choleric person is like highly virtuous in that they will be driven. They are kind of like the conscientious model of in ocean today. So they're going to be dutiful. But the natural vices, they will mow you down to get their way. A sanguine temperament, and I'm using the temperaments, although I'm more of a fan of the ocean, the big 5, but a sanguine person is, if you look at their closet from birth, you're going to see in it Rosetta Stone, a tutu, a guitar, and a tennis racket. But they can't dance, they don't know how to play tennis, and they can't play the guitar. But they have a matching outfit for everything, and they know where their best party is. So what do? They love things. They get energetic. People like having around, and they quit fast. So there's a natural virtue and a natural vice that we're just born with. And it's kind of like height. You can't take credit for being 6 foot, but you can take credit for what you do with 6 feet. Do you beat people up or do you save people? Okay. So we have the natural side of those. So we need to amplify the virtue, and we need to we need to minimize the vice. So in an interview, instead of asking people questions that I know they're going to lie about, what's your biggest weakness? That's a funny one, by the way. If their biggest weakness is they get drunk every night and sleep it off till 1 o'clock in the afternoon the next day, this is what it sounds like in an interview. Oh, me? My biggest weakness? I would say probably loyalty and perfectionism. It's like, oh, really? I believe that. Okay, let me write that down. So your flaws are loyalty and perfectionism. Amazing. Wow. Do you have any strengths? Yeah, alcoholism. What? Okay, anyway. But the point would be that I like to ask questions that it's kind of hard to manipulate the answer to. So the question I ask in an interview is, tell me about the most recent time that you sacrificed for somebody. It's pretty hard for people to make that up. They could, but it's very difficult. How hard do they have to search for it? How quickly does it come to them? What do they consider sacrifice or not? And when you look at pretty much all of the virtues that exist out there, sacrifice is a part of that. And so it's a good Kickstarter.
Yeah, guys, if you've heard this, there's clearly not it was an open ended question where he is making you come up with an answer. You cannot, like you said, fake it. I guess you could, but you'll
Mm.
see it as an interviewer. You'll really pick up on that. It's fascinating, Dave. As I'm listening to you talk, I mean, you mentioned Kahneman, Frankel, going to Robinson. Education is clearly something. Not, and I'm not just talking college. I'm talking post education, reading. It's clearly something that you've devoted a lot of time to. I guess my question would be, is there one that really stands out in your mind? One book, one that maybe up to three where you're like, man, this was really eye-opening for me, and this is what I got from it. Clearly leading the Giants, leading Giants, I need to check out. I have not, but that's his book, by the way, if you didn't pick up on that. But for you, Dave, was there one that you're like, man, this is just
Is that
gold?
what you're talking about? Is this a shameful promotion? Is that what that is?
It's a good looking
By the
book, man.
way, when it
Good
debuted
job.
on Amazon, it was #1 in motivation, #1 in leadership and team building, and it beat Bill Gates, who came out the same day.
Ooh, that's again leading
Yeah.
Giants, I guess. Apropos. So outside of that book,
I would say
was
yes.
there one for you?
There are several, and some of them are a little bit obscure. So first of all, things like Nicomachean Ethics from Aristotle. I mean, talk about like a great basis for understanding that if we want happiness, we need to live a virtuous life and we need to have good friendships. I mean, that's a simple summary of the book, but that's a huge part of it. There's another author who's a philosopher, and his name is Josef Pieper, and he's since passed. But he wrote a book on the cardinal virtues. So I've heard you talk about some of the cardinal virtues, but the cardinal virtues, the word cardinal comes from the Latin term hinge, just meaning that all of the virtues hinge upon them. The first one is prudence. You can't have any virtue without prudence, because prudence is the mastery of decision making. And so in order to master decision making, I mean, Ward's never said, I loved working there because they couldn't make a decision to save their life. The reason that I want to go to, I want to just kind of scroll through all of the Let's Go Win podcasts is because I can see they're bad decision makers, and that's going to help me. No. People want to be around good decision makers. The next one is justice. You can't possibly have justice if you can't make good decisions, because making good decisions requires 3 steps. The first one is, Aristotle would call this like a discernment. Okay, I call it desiring what is good, and this more is a Josef Pieper thing. You have to desire what is good to make good decisions. Otherwise, you can't. If you don't desire what's good in your relationship, if you don't desire what's good in your work, with your employees, with your neighbor, even as an Uber driver, you can't possibly have good. Then you have to know what's real. Aristotle would call this judgment. That's to get good counsel, to understand, to examine things. And then you have to command or do what it is. So desire what is good, know what is real, and then do what is good. So, for example, if you're a baker and you bake cakes, a good thing would be to bake delicious cakes that are attractive and sell them at a reasonable price. And you want to come up with a new recipe, you come up with it, you have 20 people that you're going to test it with, you give it all 20 people, each one of them throws up, looks at you and says, it's the worst cake ever. And you look back at them and you go, you're tasting it wrong. Okay, well, clearly, you might desire what's good, but you don't know what's real and you won't accept it, so you can't act on what's good. So you have to desire what's good, know what is real, and then act on what is good. Can you imagine having a judge who's judging you in the court of law when you're innocent, but you've got some evidence against you, even though that it's false? They don't desire what's good and know what's real. Oh, you're totally screwed, right? So you need to have somebody that does that. So that gives you justice. And then that gives you fortitude, what we call grit, stick-to-itiveness, all these things. You can't possibly have grit, stick-to-itiveness, if you don't have justice and you don't have prudence. Think about it this way. You're a 27-year-old married guy with 2 kids and a good job. You've been uncoordinated most of your life and not a thrill seeker. And you decide one weekend you want to become a base jumper. Okay. Jump off of low buildings and cliffs. This is the average person would go, wow, how courageous. That's not courageous. That's nutty. That's crazy. It's insane. There's no sense of justice in widowing your kids. You're probably going to get killed. And you certainly don't desire what's good, know at all what is real. And so you're acting upon insanity. But it's not about base jumping. I mean, if you're 21 years old and you're coordinated and you've always been a risk taker and you're not married and Red Bull's going to give you a $2 million contract, take it. Or if you're 85 and you've got all your affairs in order, grandkids might think it'd be cool to see grandpa go out that way. So it's not about base jumping. It's about having those things. And then the last one is temperance, which is to resist temptation. And we've seen how many people have done all sorts of great things, but they, that secretary was just a little bit too hot, or that whatever it was, and that gets in their way too. So those two books, Aristotle, Pieper, they are very much there. They affect things because they're centered on those. And then there's another one too, which again would be obscure. So I read a lot of the mainstream books because I like to see how the mainstream people are pulling in these ancient ideas, but I also read a lot of the original sources there. And one of them is called On Wealth and Poverty, and it's by St. John Chrysostom, and he was a 4th century bishop. And he basically talks about, I would summarize it this way: money is only good for the good that it does. And then we have attachment to money. That's a problem. And as a person that does have great wealth, I did well with my businesses. I know how easy it is to fall into that. But you have to just say, listen, I am not my car, and I don't actually need that car. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that you can't enjoy good things and say, man, does that sound amazing? And the manufacturing there is awesome. It's just having a detachment from it that matters, that it doesn't become more important than what really is important, and that you don't serve those things before you serve people in greater need, that there has to be an order in which it comes.
I'm curious, after hearing that particular, which, by the way, these 3 books have never been mentioned on the show. So as much of a reader as I think I am, Dave just one-upped me several times, which is awesome, because now I get to go check these things out. I'm curious though, with what you just said, specific, I just lost my entire question because I was thinking about the darn books. What I was going to ask was, when you have the virtues, okay, and you're building these incredible teams, you build culture is the big word that's been around for, I don't know, the last decade, maybe 2 decades, where culture. What did that look like for you, Dave, inside of those companies where you're like, all right, we're hiring more on virtue, hopefully less vices or less vice. What do you kind of coach when it comes to building culture within a company? Are you like, know your core values? Where do you land on all that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So there's a couple of different things. Now, our business had less than 2% voluntary turnover with our employee base, and even with our independent contractors, it was less than 10%. So we were named year after year after year, best place to work, all that kind of stuff. So the cultural aspect was important. 2 things. We do try to interview as best we can on virtue, but you can't really know it until you're working with a person. Here's what I found out though. Most people want to be the best version of themselves. And so my biggest company that I built was called is still today called Best Version Media. And the reason we call it Best Version Media is because we wanted people to be the best version of themselves. So we had the best version of every advertising opportunity for our sponsors. We had the best version of all content for our readers. We had the best version of the opportunity for our employees. And then we had the spark, which made it all real. And that is that each one of us needed to be the best version of ourselves. So I'd always ask people, listen, if you have 2 different teams, 2 different companies that have everything is the same, they have the same equal access to product, to technology, to the markets, to the people, to the resources. But one team is committed to being the best version of themselves individually and then collectively, and the other is not. Who's going to win? They always understood that. And most people opt into it. And because we were so brazen right away in our interview about what our culture was, which was to become the best version of themselves. And by the way, we didn't say we're a bunch of excellent people always being excellent at all times that really shun other people who have flaws. We were like, no, man, we're all working it out together. We're a bunch of flawed people waking up on a day trying to become better. Like that gives you like the security of not being judged, but the tenacity to go after awesomeness. And that brought a lot of people in, because I've never met a person who was like, I was the worst version of myself today. That felt great. I want to double down tomorrow. Now, people sometimes do it, but they don't want to. And now when they're in this like tribe of people who want to become the best version of themselves, and to each one of us, that means a little bit something different according to our family environments and whatnot, but they're striving for better. And we all get that. And so I would define that. I would say that our organization is based on a foundation of humility, which is precision truth about yourself. And that foundation of humility isn't, again, a bunch of people running around saying, look at how humble I am. I'm the world's most humble man. I nominate me. Okay, that doesn't work, right? Instead, what it is it's like, listen, I know where I'm flawed, but I'm going to work on that, and I'm willing to take that medicine. And then that we have a fun-loving spirit, we have a compassionate heart, and we have a strong professional will. You have no right to your successes if you don't own your failures, and we would rather be, wrong to our own prosperity than right to our own demise. Just making a point. And people got that. They understood that. And then we talked a lot about the primary motivators. Number one is love because it's totally self-giving. Number three is fear and insecurity. And number two is the sticky wicket, and that's self-justification. And that comes with pride, and pride comes with blindness. And so we can't make excuses for ourselves. We just have to be open, knowing that the leader you're talking to knows that they make mistakes too, so they're going to get past it right away. But it's hard to work with a person that doesn't see their flaws when they're not performing. And I mean, there are many more things. Culture, the mistake that people make when they're trying to build a business is they believe that culture is a bumper sticker or a one-time speech. And it is not. Culture is not a medicine or a speech. Culture is a daily diet, and it is a daily diet of goodness. It doesn't have a lot of sugar in it, doesn't have a lot of carbs in it, and it is very nutritious, and you have to eat it regularly.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of brilliance just in the name alone. Best version media, and then we're trying to be the best version of ourselves immediately. Thematically, this is what we expect from you on a daily. That doesn't mean, again, Dave's been very upfront. We have flaws. I'm sure, vices. I have these things, but I'm working on being the best version of myself. That makes total sense. And again, it's not a bumper sticker. It's not some mission statement thrown on a wall that nobody ever sees again.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I feel like so often, and people wordsmith these great long mission statements, and I'm like, who the hell can repeat that? I mean, I couldn't. It's a paragraph long. The theme of your company is incredible. When you started Best Version Media, and I'm saying that correctly, right? Best
Yep.
Version Media. When you started that company, what did it look like, David? Was it you with a vision, an idea, and some enthusiasm, and then you just kept building upon it? Or did you have a crew of people that's like, Dave's the man, let's go, we have 100 people, we're going to build this thing together? What did it look like, brother?
No, it was much more of the former than the latter. I had a mutual friend whose brother, I had a friend whose friend's brother. Okay, so that was how. Okay, was in a mom and pop business that was a little bit like ours, even though it didn't exist yet. And I remember walking through the airport, and when I heard that, I had gone home every single day for about 10 years, designing a company that I wanted to build. And I had a lot of smaller companies. I mean, I was speaking and writing books at a very young age. And so I had consulting companies, and I would always do projects and stuff like that. But I wanted something that wasn't just doing, a few million and hundreds of thousands. I wanted to do something that was doing, hundreds of millions. And so I wanted to build something like that. And so I was designing the culture, designing the opportunity, designing everything. The one thing I didn't know what the product was going to be. And so I'm walking along in the airport, and he tells me about this. It was like literally like love at first sight type of thing. It's like my heart stopped, and I said, I know that's what it is. And it was kind of a twisting turn road there, but there were a couple of guys that worked in my organization. One of my other organizations, my consulting company, and I just went to him and I said, hey, there's a new project we're going to work on. And we started working on that, and we built it. But it was very modest, humble days. I went 6 years without making any money when I first started. I paid everybody else first. Everybody else was making money. I just was last in line. And some of them were making actually pretty good money. But I knew that I'd be able to get there, and I was able to do it. But it was very modest. It was hilarious, actually, when we look back at the start of the company back in the early days. Well, I sit there with some of the people that have been around for 15, 20 years. Well, 17 years now, the business is old. It started in 2007. And we laugh about the early days and how rudimentary it was. And when you're, a bigger organization, you've got a lot of, assets. You just look back on hilarious early days, and it's nostalgic and fun. It's the type of thing that you never want to do again, but you'd never want to trade because the experience is awesome.
Well, and I think that's what I'm glad you brought it up. Where look, 6 years. So often people look. Well, Dave sold his company a couple times, 9 figures. I mean, That's just the easy street. And the
Mhm.
true story is no, man. Like, I'm sure there was a lot of tough decisions made. There was a lot of grinding along the way. And I'm glad you said that. For 6 years, literally, everyone else got paid but me. But I knew my vision was clear. I knew what we were building. Clearly, it worked out. I now know when I brain farted on what I was going to ask you before. You were talking about money. And since we're the exit, I brought up a couple times. What was your relationship with money, good, bad, or indifferent? Because I know for me, one of my biggest self limiting beliefs was making a lot of money was a bad thing because that was for
Mhm.
everyone else. Did you have any of that attachment? I know you talked about the book. That's where this came from. When you were talking about the losing attachment from the money and do great things with it, what was your relationship with money as you got into this professional world and started doing really well?
Well, my parents are wonderful people, and my father is just like he's just a very humble man who doesn't draw attention to himself, has never needed a lot of money, and what money he earned, he served his family and kids and church and poor people with. I mean, they took me to a soup kitchen once a month. Starting when I was 10 years old, which they continue to do. They're in their 80s now, which they continue to do today. Once a month, they do it, and we would serve people that were in really dire straits downtown in the inner city of Milwaukee. And not only would we serve them, but as a 10-year-old, then I would go through and I would sit oftentimes just by myself. I mean, this is back in a day where maybe a 10-year-old they wouldn't have that to do that now, but I would just sit there next to all these people who were by and large living on the street by myself at the table with 12 people. And there'd be a person next to me with two teeth in their mouth and a person over there that smelled like alcohol, and I would dine with them. And that taught me an enormous amount in my life. And their example in other places. So while I have ebbed and flowed as a human, when I had more money, and I wasn't thinking about money, I was like, I'm a good guy. I wouldn't think about money. And all of a sudden, now I have it. I'm like, that'd be a cool car. It evolves and you move into that. I have, for the most part, while imperfect there, kept that under control. And I have to give that credit to the grace of God and credit to my parents. And by and large in my life, I've always tithed first. So when I sold the companies, the first thing that I figured out what I was going to do is where I was going to give that money. And the other thing, too, that was an important part for me was getting as many people tied into the bounty of the sale of the company as I could. So where there were opportunities for me to sell it for more and keep more, I wanted to provide incentive and opportunity for people to be a part of that whole thing. I heard a saying one time. The number has changed in my life as my wealth has grown. But the first time I heard it, somebody said, how much money do you really need? For every million you have more than 10 million, you're just a million more an asshole. And I thought that was kind of a funny thing for them to say. And it's not true because there are some great people. I don't know if you know who Tom Monahan is, but Tom Monahan was the founder of Domino's Pizza. And he owned the Detroit Tigers and won the World Series. And he was I mean, at the time that he was a billionaire, I think there were only like a few dozen in America in the 80s. And he was the entrepreneur of the year, along with of the decade, actually, in the 80s, along with Lee Iacocca. So he would have been the Elon Musk equivalent, right, at the time. And he used his money for greatness. He built a Catholic university, which is an amazing university. He's given away most of his money. He has assets which are remaining there, but he went from flying in his jet to, doing all sorts of very simple, modest things to build his wealth. And I know Tom well. I'm on the board of Ave as a trustee, and he's right down here by us. But I watched him do magnificent things with his money that he couldn't have done if he didn't have the wealth. And so wealth isn't the problem. In fact, you know what you see all the time? You see people sit in non-for-profits talking about how amazing they are and how righteous they are because they have these little salaries that aren't much, and all those vain wealthy people out there. And then they end the meeting saying, what are we going to do now? Well, let's go ask those vain wealthy people for money so they can pay our salary and we can keep our mission. So I would say that the body of Christ includes both, and some people are called to have wealth and others are not. And if you're called to have wealth, you just have to keep it mentally under control. And money's only good for the good that it does.
Yeah. No, I'm glad it's fascinating to hear Tom Monahan and then Lee Iacocca. And Lee is just one of those characters, I would say that good, bad, or indifferent. I mean, he's memorable, and I've brought him up many times as an example of maybe not how to lead, where it sounds like Tom absolutely incredible and did some amazing stuff with his wealth. Leading Giants, brother, when you decided to write that book, what was the like, yep, I got to write this book. This is why this world needs it. This is what it's going to, and obviously it did well. Like you said, it beat out Bill Gates, which that's definitely pretty remarkable. When you wrote it, what was the, why did I need to write this book? What was that feeling?
Well, what I saw is that if you look at where people feel out of control in their lives, it almost all comes back. Is that Marquette University?
Yeah, my boy plays tennis there. Sorry, I didn't mean to
interrupt
your
thought. Milwaukee. But I grew up. My dad went to Marquette, so I have a lot of Marquette. I saw that MU recognized right away. So what I see is if I have somebody that comes to me and say I'm having a hard time as an entrepreneur, our advertising is off, our marketing is off, or I can't get funding, or I'm having a difficult time selling the company, or I'm having a difficult time recruiting, whatever it happens to be. Almost in every single circumstance, it comes down to that individual person's ability to influence the matter. And influence, like if you have great personal influence, you can solve pretty much every problem in your life. Okay, my wife doesn't listen to me. You don't have influence. Kids don't listen to me. You don't have influence. I'm on a committee at church. They don't listen to me. You don't have influence. Can't get a promotion? No influence. Nobody listens to you in your job? No influence. You can't sell anything? No influence. So let's solve that. If we can solve influence, we can solve the rest. Now, I have a pretty complex seminar that I'm building. We're going to be releasing it later in the year on optimizing your personality, to literally take your personality and make it as optimized as it possibly can be. And influence plays a massive part in that. So we drill down to the character, and something we haven't really talked about so far is that we all have these universal desires. They're called the transcendentals. So you and I, and every human that has ever walked, desire goodness, truth, beauty, unity, love, and family, and home, I should say. Not family would be a related thing, but home. There's this desire for home that we all have, right? Feels like home. People get that. I feel like I don't have a home. People get that. But the three or the four big ones that I start with: goodness, truth, beauty, and unity. So we desire what's good. We desire what's true. And we desire what's beautiful. But by the way, with an unquenchable thirst for them. I hope you can cut that out. That is the only person on emergency bypass, and that's my wife. So you know what? You don't need to cut that out because it's proof that there's one person that can jump past me on things. So anyway, but the whole idea is like, you would never say, do you know what? I've had enough beauty now. That's enough beauty. I would like some ugliness now. Okay. When we have beauty, we look for more of it. Same with goodness. But we have a hard time understanding or defining what these things are. And then truth. Nobody's like, you know what? I've had enough truth now. I just want to be lied to for the rest of my life. And the more truth we have, the more truth we want behind that truth. Okay, there is truth that 2 + 2 is 4, but all of a sudden now we find ourselves in quantum mechanics. Okay. Oh, it's true that there's, I ate that and I got sick. What was that? Oh, that was a disease or a parasite or a bacteria. Oh, wait, there's small things that live in the world. And now we have nanoscience. So the more truth we have, the more truth we want until we have the ultimate truth. The more goodness we have, the more goodness we want until we have the ultimate goodness. The more beauty we want with an unquenchable appetite for all of this. Well, we have a stomach that has an appetite. And the reason we have an appetite is because there's food. Okay. We would have no appetite if there was no food because that doesn't make any sense. Okay. So, you can imagine a bunch of people that are hungry but with no stomachs. You have to have the manifestation of the thing that you desire. Well, by the way, ultimately speaking, our transcendentals lead us to God because the only thing that's perfectly good, perfectly beautiful, and perfectly truthful is God and unites all. Now, let's say a person doesn't believe that last part. Fine. I work with them all the time. Best Version Media was made up of all sorts of different people who had, voted in different sides of the aisle, who went home to different lifestyles, some with religion, some without religion. We all got along. because we had transcendental desires that were the same. And I know that if you come to my team, you want truth, I'm going to give it to you. You want beauty, so I'm going to make the environment beauty, the materials beautiful. You want goodness. Best way to understand goodness is that whatever you're doing, the creator of a thing, that thing is used for what it's created for, and it's manifest to its fullness. So for example, you create a meeting to balance the budget. We balance the budget. And somebody says, how was the meeting? Good. Why? Balance the budget. Didn't balance the budget. How was the meeting? Not good. It's pretty simple. But that meeting could be more beautiful, right? And that's to make it better. So knowing that these universal things are there for everyone, whether or not anybody does or does not know this, when you have a great culture, the transcendentals are a part of it. You'd say, that was beautiful. What is it like to work there? It's good. Why? Well, they're honest, good people, great work environment. So what I help people is to be intentional as a leader to make sure that you're putting in things like the cardinal virtues, putting in things like the transcendentals. And then there's a lot of strategy things too. Like I teach people, listen, if you're going to be a great leader, you need to think like a criminal. I mean, you have to know how everything you're going to say is going to be used against you. You have to know how everything you can say, people just like teenagers are going to use as an excuse not to do it. Hey, how come, like I tell my kids, I tell anybody I work with, the key to success is doing what you don't feel like doing. Okay. And the most powerful thing in the world is a decision. So my kids are all adults now and married or on the way. Not only do I have the 9 kids, but I have 9 grandkids. But so as he was a teenager sitting on the couch, and it was in the middle of the day and he's watching TV. I go, John Paul, what are you doing? And he goes, Dad, I really want to do my homework and I don't feel like watching TV, but I know the key to success is doing what I don't feel like I should do. So I'm just going to watch TV a little bit longer. And I've made that decision, which was powerful, and use it against me. So, you've got to know, how are people going to do that sort of thing? That's of course a teenage smart aleck. But when it comes to people really in the workplace, they will use stuff against you. Hey, how come you didn't make your phone calls and get your appointments? Well, because all the administrative work that you tell me is so important that I need to do. And so they use it against you. So how do you put order there so that they can't do that sort of thing and you raise them to the highest standard? And Leading Giants helps people really walk through that.
Yeah, I'm excited to check it out. So I'm clear. Do we have, of the 4 major ones, did you say we're really kind of predetermined, or we have one that we're really, I don't know, it's it's to the core of our DNA? Did I understand that correctly?
All of them. Goodness, truth, unity, beauty, and home.
Got it.
Those desires, all of us have a desire for those. Human beings, from the beginning of time until the end of time, are wired to desire those.
Got it. Fascinating, brother. I'm excited to read it. I'm definitely going to check it out, which everyone go check it out as well. Let's talk about it later, because clearly Dave has some deep thoughts on some cool stuff, which I love. And I know there's a question out there I know I should have asked you, Dave, and I just didn't know enough to ask you. What is that? What is that one question that, before we start to wrap this up, we have to make sure to get across to the audience?
So I would say that we need to classically, as a great question, by the way, is we need to do classically what Stephen Covey says. We have to begin with the end in mind. So I look at a lot of people and, they're hilarious. They're like, they tell their kids, you got to eat right. And they focus on eating right, something I very much believe in, by the way. Exercise, be disciplined with your money. You can imagine you're 20 years old and you say to your dad, or you're 21, you just graduated from college, and you're like, hey, Dad, you know what? I'm not going to get a retirement plan because I don't know if I'll live that long. And he's like, yeah, that's true. Smoke them while you got them. Like he's not going to do that. You're like, hey, Dad, I don't know if I'm going to get, health insurance because I feel healthy. Yeah, okay. No, you're going to say you do it anyway. And you're preparing your child as you are preparing yourself, ultimately speaking, for like a retirement. That's what people are thinking about. You're 21 years old and you're immediately putting money into your retirement plan. You're thinking about retirement. That's funny. And I meet people, and I'm down in Florida. Okay, I'm 56. I'll be 56. And I'm around all these people who are retired. And it's like they worked their entire life for what, 20 years of freaking pickleball? Are you kidding me? That's what after that? So I think that's good, by the way. I would encourage all those things. Like, hey, man, eat right, be smart, work hard, think about your retirement, save, build a great business, build a great family, have fun in community, learn the guitar, learn a foreign language, have some fun, all those things. But at the end of the day, man, if you don't figure out that when you die, something else is going to happen, You got to work on that. Now, I know what I believe it is, but I can tell you that everybody wrestles with that. And to the degree that a person comes to conclusions about that, they have mental health. And so they not only live better here on earth, but, you know, they have Pascal's wager. Do you know what that is? Pascal's wager is basically that if you know, he's the great mathematician. He said, listen, if you don't believe in God and believing God was required to go to heaven, then you've got quite a gamble and you've lost a lot. But if you do believe in God and there is no God, you haven't lost anything. And if you do believe in God and God is real, you've gained everything. So, like,
pretty simple.
If you want to take the wager, there's a pretty smart way to do it. Now, it's also kind of superficial and funny, but it's an interesting way to look at it. So that's how I invite people, is to say, listen, begin by building with the end in mind. And Viktor Frankl, by the way, in Man's Search for Meaning, when he developed logotherapy, he talked about existential crisis. This is basically what he keyed in on. He keyed in on the idea that the people that actually were the healthiest and that survived were literally able to give away the paltry 300 calories worth of food that they got that day to somebody else who they thought needed it worse, okay, or more. And so they were able to give. They had this like sense of being that was beyond their own immediate needs, and it was kind of a philanthropic almost type of external giving type of thing. And then ultimately speaking, though, they never stopped thinking as far out as they could. They always had hope of home. And the people who lost hope of home or became so self-absorbed became unhealthy. Now, we know certain people, no matter what their attitudes, couldn't have, done anything about their own fate. But for those that were able to, those were important. And so I just tell people, listen, live that way. What do you have to lose?
Well, I mean, guys, if you haven't picked up, again, Man's Search for Meaning, it is one of, in my opinion, one of the top 5 greatest books of all time. I love it. I read it every year. Giver's gain is while you were talking about that, Dave, I was just like, man, you embody that. Yeah, I didn't mention it, but as you said, when you sold, you wanted as many people to be a part of that transaction as possible. That's not common. And yet you obviously did that. And then you did it again, another transaction for the company. I hope people hear that loud and clear. Giver's gain. And I think it's just an incredible, it's really the theme of what I'm hearing from you, which is amazing. Brother, for those that don't know you, they want to connect with you online, see what you're doing, whether it's leading giants, or I know you just said that you have an amazing thing that you're building. Where is the best place for my audience to connect with you online?
I mean, if they just go to my YouTube channel at Durand On Demand, they're going to keep up to speed on most things, and everything is right in there to connect with. And I appreciate you asking the question. It's just been a pleasure to be with you today. I enjoyed the interview. You asked great questions, and best with you on Let's Go Win too.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate you, and thank you so much for showing up the way you did. Just an incredible interview.
Thanks so much.
Wow. As I told you in the intro, get ready to write stuff down. He clearly is well read. There's so much good stuff here that I wrote down. That last part about the transcendental virtues of goodness, truth, beauty, and home. When he was talking about that, it made so much sense. And I just there's so much that you could ask somebody like Dave, because he's experienced some incredible things. He's clearly, like I said, well educated and well read, and continues to just make himself a better person. Which, again, Best Version Media, that makes sense. He named literally his company the best version of him, and that's how Dave showed up. So I got a ton from it. I assume you did too. Please make sure to share this out with someone that you know, love, and care about. And also, if you want to be the best version of yourself, look at being a part of the self community. It is absolutely incredible what we're already accomplishing, the people that are in the group. It's all about your strengths, energy, love, and freedom. And all of us have somewhere where we can upgrade. And that whole idea of being the best version of yourself, that's what the self community is all about. So check it out. Go to letsgowin.com. hit me up, info@letsgowin.com if you're interested in being a part of the community. And until next time, remember, your mindset matters. I appreciate y'all. We'll talk soon.